Two generals stood behind history's largest invasion, but only one prepared a letter accepting blame if it all failed. Eisenhower held supreme authority while Bradley commanded the troops on the ground, creating tension over who truly owned the mission's outcome. A risky weather decision, a letter written in secret, a command split that changed everything. When the crisis came, only one man's signature mattered, and it wasn't who most expected. Eisenhower's role, supreme commander and ultimate responsibility. Dwight Eisenhower wasn't just another general. He held the highest military position in the entire Allied force during the invasion of Europe. His official title was Supreme Allied Commander, which meant he stood above everyone else in the chain of command. But what did that really mean? Eisenhower didn't lead soldiers into combat himself. He didn't storm beaches or fight in trenches. Instead, his job was something much bigger and far more complicated. He had to bring together armies from different countries, manage egos of powerful leaders, and make decisions that affected millions of lives. He was part diplomat, part strategist, and part decision-maker. While other generals focused on winning battles, Eisenhower focused on winning the war. He coordinated ground troops, air forces, and naval fleets from multiple nations, all working towards one massive goal. But with that kind of power came something else, something heavy, ultimate responsibility. And when the biggest decision of the war arrived, only one man
could make the final call. But would he get it right? The weather was turning bad, and time was running out.
All command. Eisenhower's job wasn't easy. Imagine trying to organize a massive team where everyone speaks different languages, follows different rules, and has their own ideas about how to win. That's exactly what he faced. He had to coordinate efforts between American, British, Canadian, and other allied forces. Each country had its own army, navy, and air force. Each had its own commanders who believed their way was best. Eisenhower had to make them work together like a single machine. He managed ground forces that would land on the beaches. He coordinated air forces that would drop paratroopers behind enemy lines and eliminate key targets. He worked with naval fleets that would transport thousands of soldiers across dangerous waters. Every piece had to move at the right time, in the right place, or the entire operation could fall apart. It was like conducting an orchestra, except every wrong note could mean losing lives. And the pressure didn't just come from the enemy, it came from politicians, from other generals, and from the weight of history itself. But coordination alone wasn't enough. Someone still had to say go. Final decision, June 5, 1944. The largest invasion in history was supposed to launch that day. But there was a problem, a big one. The weather turned terrible. Storms rolled in, waves crashed high, clouds covered the skies. Pilots couldn't see their targets. Ships rocked violently. Paratroopers would be blown off course. Everything Eisenhower and his team had planned for months was now in danger. The generals gathered around him, waiting. Some said postpone. Others worried that waiting too long would give away their plans. The enemy might discover their location. Troops sitting on ships were getting seasick and tired. Morale was dropping. Eisenhower stood in that room, knowing that whatever he decided would change history forever. If he launched and it failed, thousands would lose their lives for nothing. If he waited too long, the opportunity might disappear. No one else could make this call. Not Churchill, not Roosevelt, not any other general. It was his decision alone. And on the night of June 5th, after hearing the weather might improve slightly, Eisenhower made his choice. He said, "Okay, we'll go." But he did something else that night, something nobody knew about. Acceptance of failure. That same night, after giving the order to launch the invasion, Eisenhower sat down alone and wrote a letter. It wasn't a letter of victory or confidence. It was a letter of failure. He wrote it in case the invasion didn't work, in case soldiers couldn't hold the beaches, in case the entire operation collapsed and thousands lost their lives. The letter was short, simple, and powerful. In it, Eisenhower accepted full responsibility. He made it clear that if the mission failed, the blame was his alone, not Bradley's, not any other commander's, his. He even made a small mistake in the letter, dating it July 5th instead of June 5th, showing just how much pressure he was under. Why would a leader do this? Because Eisenhower understood something important. With great power comes great responsibility. He knew that as Supreme Commander, he couldn't hide behind anyone else. He couldn't blame the weather, bad luck, or his generals. The mission was his to own, success or failure. That letter sat in his pocket, ready to be released if the worst happened. Fortunately, he never had to use it. But while Eisenhower carried that burden, another man was leading soldiers into the fight. Bradley's role: field commander and operational execution. Omar Bradley was a different kind of leader. While Eisenhower worked from headquarters, Bradley was on the ground with the soldiers. He commanded the 1st U.S. Army during the invasion and later led the 12th U.S. Army Group, which became the largest group of American soldiers ever under one commander. Bradley's job wasn't about diplomacy or politics, it was about execution. He had to take Eisenhower's big plans and make them happen in the dirt, smoke, and chaos of combat. He worked with maps, coordinated movements, and made quick decisions as battles unfolded. Soldiers saw him, they knew him, he walked among them, talked with them, and understood their struggles. His style was calm, careful, and steady. He didn't take unnecessary risks. He didn't rush into dangerous situations without thinking it through. That's why troops trusted him. That's why they called him the soldier's general. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but he got the job done. Bradley represented the thousands of men who fought, bled, and sacrificed on the front lines. And while Eisenhower carried the weight of the entire war, Bradley carried the weight of every single soldier under his command. But his careful approach would later cause tension with others.
Operational planning. Bradley didn't just follow orders, he helped create them. He was deeply involved in planning the American side of the invasion, especially the breakout from Normandy. After the initial landings, Allied forces got stuck. The French countryside was filled with hedgerows, thick walls of dirt and bushes that made movement slow and dangerous. Enemy forces used them for cover. Every field became a trap. Progress slowed to a crawl. Bradley knew they had to break through or the entire invasion could stall, so he worked on a plan called Operation Cobra. It was a massive strike designed to punch a hole through enemy defenses and allow Allied forces to flood into France. The plan required perfect timing, heavy air support, and coordinated ground movements. Bradley spent weeks refining every detail. He studied maps, talked with commanders, and made adjustments. When Operation Cobra finally launched, it worked. The breakthrough happened. Allied forces poured through the gap, and the enemy began to collapse. It was one of Bradley's greatest achievements. But even his successes came with questions. Some wondered, was he too slow, too cautious? Tactical command and differences in style. Bradley led troops across some of the war's most important campaigns: North Africa, Sicily, France, and into Germany. He was there, in the field, making decisions as battles unfolded. But his style wasn't like everyone else's. Generals like George Patton were aggressive, bold, and willing to take huge risks. They believed in speed and striking hard. Bradley, on the other hand, believed in careful planning and steady progress. He didn't want to waste lives on risky moves. He wanted to be sure before committing his forces. That made him dependable. Eisenhower valued that, but others criticized him. Patton often called Bradley too timid, too cautious. He believed Bradley missed opportunities by playing it safe. Some historians later agreed, saying that Bradley's slow approach may have allowed enemy forces to escape when they could have been captured. But Bradley's supporters pointed out something important. His cautious approach saved lives. Reckless attacks could lead to heavy losses. Bradley believed that soldiers' lives mattered more than quick victories. It was a difference in philosophy. And that difference would become even clearer later in the war, because when a major crisis hit, Bradley's decisions would be questioned like never before. Strategic versus tactical errors and Battle of the Bulge decision, December 1944. The war seemed to be winding down. Allied forces had pushed deep into Europe. Victory felt close. But then, disaster struck. Enemy forces launched a massive surprise attack in the Ardennes forest, a region both Eisenhower and Bradley had left weakly defended. They called it a calculated risk. They believed the enemy was too weak to launch a major operation there. They were wrong. The attack broke through Allied lines. Thousands of American soldiers were caught off guard. It became one of the largest surrenders in U.S. military history. Panic spread. The situation was spiraling out of control. Eisenhower had to act fast. He made a controversial decision. He temporarily split Bradley's command and gave part of it to British General Montgomery. Bradley was furious. He felt embarrassed and undermined. A tense meeting followed. Eisenhower had to remind Bradley of something crucial. I am responsible to the American people, not you. It was a harsh moment, but it revealed the truth. Eisenhower held ultimate responsibility. He had to do what was necessary to win, even if it upset his commanders.
The split worked, the crisis was managed, but the question remained, who was really to blame? Ultimately, who was responsible? The answer isn't simple. Eisenhower bore the supreme institutional responsibility. He was the one who had to answer to presidents, prime ministers, and the entire Allied world. When things went wrong, his name was on the line. That's why he wrote that letter accepting full blame if the invasion failed. That's why he made the final call on the weather. That's why he split Bradley's command during the crisis in the Ardennes. But Bradley was responsible too, just in a different way. He was accountable for executing the plans, for leading the soldiers, for making tactical decisions on the ground. When intelligence failed, when operations stalled, when soldiers were lost, those decisions fell on him. The truth is, both men carried responsibility. Eisenhower carried the weight of the war. Bradley carried the weight of the soldiers. Their roles were different, but both were essential. History remembers Eisenhower as the supreme commander who led the Allies to victory. It remembers Bradley as the steady, dependable general who soldiers trusted. And in the end, maybe that's the real lesson. Leadership isn't about one person, it's about many people, each carrying their part of the burden. Two generals, two kinds of responsibility, one historic mission that changed the world forever.